The world is on edge this morning as Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to amass troops and equipment near its border with Ukraine. U.S. officials say they are still committed to diplomatic options, but according to the latest U.S. intelligence assessment, Russia now has close to 75% of its conventional forces postured there at the border. So let's have a walkthrough of exactly what is going on there with Major General James Spider-Marks, our CNN military analyst and head of geopolitical strategy at Academy Securities. Okay, can you just tell where all has Putin amassed these troops?
Well, let's take a look at it. And first of all, let's take it from Putin's perspective if we can. NATO member, NATO member, NATO member. That's what started all of this, is this movement of NATO to the east. And that's the view that Putin has that's concerning him. So what you see is these are installations that are routinely occupied by Russian forces. The red positions that you see on the map here are where exercises are taking place. And this is where Putin and President Lukashenko were located this weekend together, observing the exercises. So he has deployed, to include forces down here in Crimea, which we all know he took in 2014. So this is incredibly threatening, obviously. Ukraine's surrounded on three sides. So that's what has everybody incredibly concerned, as legitimately they should be.
And it's about the movement. Where are the troops going? So what is the new satellite imagery showing that we've seen?
Yeah, Brianna, let me show you one of the pieces of imagery that just came in. This is a tank location, but also you see tanks as well as support vehicles, which would be refuelers, armored personnel carriers for infantrymen. And clearly what the Russians use is they use their infantrymen and then tanks to support that, which is different from how the United States uses it, where we want to exploit with our armor, our tanks, and then the infantry are then used appropriately to do some really precise work. So what you see with this image is this is an indication of a very large, probably, I would say, a battalion or maybe a company within a battalion, which means there are other forces that are outside the range of this piece of imagery that are in direct positions ready to attack. Again, what we don't know, I mean, beyond that, that's intimidating, but what we don't, that's a capability. What we don't know is whether the rule is, or the mission is, to go or to continue to hold what we have.
The towns that we're seeing in these new images are very close to the border. We're talking 21 miles away. How significant is that?
Well, it's very significant because the forces that are in place have an effective range so that they could begin military operations, for example, rockets and artillery, as well as armored vehicles. They can begin operations on Russian soil before they get into Ukraine. The effective range is such as they can start right now and they can achieve objectives on the ground with the positioning not in Ukraine. And that works to Putin's advantage, right? He can hover over Ukraine. He is in his own territory. He has every right to do what he wants to do in Russia, irrespective, in his view, irrespective of what the world is saying right now. But clearly it is incredibly threatening to Ukraine and its independence.
In all of those troop positions to the north, they're all red, right? These aren't permanent troop positions because they're not in Russia. They're in Belarus, as you mentioned, Putin and Lukashenko there surveying the troops. We've learned, we've learned that these exercises that were slated to end yesterday are now going to continue indefinitely, according to Belarus's defense minister. What does that mean?
Well, again, if you try to get into the head of Putin, what he has now is a permanent presence in Belarus. These are Russian forces that are not routinely deployed there. But in his mind, he sees this as analogous to NATO, U.S. forces, other NATO partners positioning their forces in Poland, for example. We have a core headquarters, a U.S. core forward deployed headquarters in Poland. We have exercises routinely in Romania. We have exercises routinely in Hungary, training exercises. Putin is conducting operations in Belarus, and he sees this as his right to do. And I would suggest that we may not see permanent bases in Belarus, but you're going to see routine exercises between the Belarusian forces and the Russian forces going forward.
Let's listen to something that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said yesterday.
Would we see tanks rolling into Kiev? Well, you could see that. I mean, that's highly likely. You could see that. You could see a significant amount of combat power move very quickly down to take Kiev.
Highly likely. We're talking, the way he describes it, of kind of World War II style images. What did you make of that?
Well, again, let's look at the map. Forces are in Belarus, Kiev here, capital of Ukraine. The travel distance is not significant. They have a significant amount of forces here. They have a capability to invade Kiev. If they wanted to invade Kiev, they would need, and then hold Kiev and then try to replace Zelensky. My estimate is that they would need entirely more forces than what you're seeing up here. I doubt Belarus would send forces across, but they could. That would be significant. But the Russian forces have the capability, and Secretary Austin is absolutely spot on. The capability exists to do significant damage to Kiev. But as we've discussed before, if you want to take Kiev, you're probably going to end up rubbling a large percentage of Kiev. And I think what's more likely is something in this area with a potential expansion there, because that allows Putin to achieve an objective that the world might look at as we looked at Crimea 8 years ago, which was, okay, it's a big deal until it wasn't, right? So he is increasing his presence already in the Donbass. He could push this further down and the world might say, okay, that's fine. Kyiv still exists. There is no challenge there. But what that allows Putin to do is to convince Zelensky, convince the Ukrainian people, not control them physically, but to convince them that the path forward for them goes through Moscow.